Feeling as if the games were lifted straight out of the NES era, mechanically speaking, Gunman Clive and its sequel are difficult, precise, and sometimes frustrating 2D action platformers. While they aren't totally new, as the HD Collection was released on the Wii U back in 2015, and the games released individually on 3DS and other platforms before that, Gunman Clive HD Collection feels at home on the Switch. It's the kind of game I've yet to discover on the system outside the NES games released through Nintendo Online, and while it doesn't offer too much in substance or length, it's an overall fun outing for the few hours it gives, despite a few frustrating design choices. Gunman Clive begins with a familiar plot point, a kidnapped damsel and a titular hero to save the day. Through the aid of his trusty gun, the occasional minecart, and even a panda in the sequel, Clive sets off on his journey to rescue his #1 gal. Gunman Clive has a very unique art style. The hand-drawn, crayon-like look is something I found visually appealing. While the game features an abundance of yellows and oranges early on due to the Western setting, characters constantly remain highlighted to stand out. As the game progresses to new locations, especially in the sequel, new colorful backgrounds are introduced as well, never letting the original Western look overstay its welcome. In terms of gameplay, Gunman Clive is a pretty basic jump, move, and shoot kind of game, and it rarely deviates from that style. Thankfully, the game is simple enough that you can master the controls quickly, yet it's far from a cakewalk in terms of difficulty. Like the old school games it draws from, Gunman Clive is challenging, however I sometimes found it to be unfair in its platforming or bullet dodging. Occasionally, I would find myself scrolling over into the next screen, only to be immediately shot at by a previously off-screen baddie, sometimes costing me my life. This also happened after jumping some gaps, and I found it unfair as I couldn't see the enemy before making the jump. The silver lining is that respawns are quick, though you do respawn at the beginning of the level when you do fail. Levels are generally short enough that you don't feel set back too far, but it can be frustrating to even be pushed back a minute or two when it doesn't feel like your fault. When Gunman Clive deviates from its core gameplay style, it can be pretty hit or miss. On the one hand, minecart levels, side-scrolling shoot-'em-up levels, and one in which you ride a panda, which is my favorite level in the game, feel great. Since Gunman Clive retains the 2D gameplay during these sections, the controls are tight and the gameplay is challenging in a mostly fair way. However, on the other hand, Gunman Clive also introduces a gameplay section where Clive is moving into the background, instead of left to right. The new three-dimensional perspective, while a good idea in conception, ends up feeling out of place in the overall game, at least on a non-stereoscopic 3D system. In both the horse riding section and flying section of the game, I found the controls to be unreliable and distances to far-off obstacles hard to judge, causing me to run into things that damaged me too often, or making it extremely difficult to dodge the few bullets on screen headed towards Clive. Additionally, the new perspective makes it harder to shoot your own bullets where you want them to, as there's no reticle or any sort of aiming for the flying section. I had to redo these sections way more times than I would have liked, and finally finishing them felt more like me getting lucky, rather than mastering the levels themselves. While the lackluster 3D levels add a few sour spots over the course of both games, the few boss levels that Gunman Clive and its sequel bring are like cherries and icing on top of a cake with a few bad layers. Every boss level in the collection feels unique, and I was always looking forward to the next one during regular platforming levels. The bosses are a really good example of great design, as I never grew frustrated dying to any of them. Every death felt like it was my fault, and every time I progressed further into the fight, it was due to my ability to learn and adapt to the situation delivered. Taking down some of the later, more intricate bosses in the collection proved to be a rewarding and exhilarating experience, often followed by a sigh of joy and relief acknowledging the challenge I had just overcome. The boss levels are truly some of the best parts of the entire collection, and encountering a new one was always a treat. While not an overall hindrance to my enjoyment of the collection, I found the music in Gunman Clive to be overall lackluster and not very memorable. I may be spoiled with indie 2D games typically blowing it out of the park in its orchestration, but no track really stood out or even felt distinct from any of the other ones, except for a Spanish-themed track near the end of the sequel. In terms of replayability, Gunman Clive offers a few extra modes and gameplay styles for those wanting an easier or more challenging experience. From the start, players are able to choose between Clive, Miss Johnson, and Chieftain Bob. Miss Johnson changes things up by reducing movement speed in favor of a Princess Peach-like float, making the platforming sections a bit easier for those who need help with the precision. Chieftain Bob completely removes the pistol from your moveset, replacing it with a speared melee attack, only able to hit enemies directly in front of you. Additionally, the Chieftain has increased air mobility, allowing you to make longer jumps and fly through levels at a faster pace. I found Chieftain Bob to be the most fun to experiment around with, as it made the game more difficult, yet more satisfying when you fly through a level as fast as you can. Additionally, Gunman Clive offers a no damage label on the level select screen for each level you complete without getting hit. It's an additional challenge for those looking to 100% the game, and one that I suspect will leave many on the verge of tossing their Joy-Cons or Pro Controller at a wall, like I almost did. Overall, the Gunman Clive HD Collection is an enjoyable experience with many peaks and valleys. Standouts for me include the boss sections, the difficulty in platforming, its visual presentation, and the general sense of accomplishment felt at the end of a fair yet challenging level. Unfortunately, what sets Gunman Clive and its sequel apart from some of the best action platformers are a few less than fair level design choices, out of place and poorly controlled three-dimensional sections, and a forgetful soundtrack. In the end, the highs overshadowed the lows for me, and I'm walking away mostly satisfied. I like the Gunman Clive HD Collection, and I'm interested to see what its developer releases out into the world in the future. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to GameXplain for more on Gunman Clive, the Nintendo Switch, and other things gaming. Bye!